The submersible Hadal Explorer descended through layers of crushing darkness, its titanium hull groaning against the immense pressure of the deepest ocean trench known to mankind. 7 miles beneath the Pacific's surface, where sunlight had never touched and temperatures hovered just above freezing, the 3-person research vessel continued its historic dive toward the Challenger Deep. Inside the cramped sphere, the marine biologist's breath fogged the porthole as she peered into the abyss. Bioluminescent creatures drifted past like fallen stars, their alien forms pulsing with ethereal light. The oceanographer beside her monitored depth readings that defied comprehension, 35,000 feet and still descending. The pilot's steady hands guided them through waters that had remained undisturbed since the Earth's formation. "Sonar's picking up something massive," the pilot whispered, his voice tight with concentration. The screen before him displayed an impossible reading, a structure larger than any known deep-sea formation, moving with deliberate purpose through the Hadal Zone. The biologist leaned forward, her scientific excitement overriding the primal fear that gnawed at her consciousness. "Could be a whale fall, maybe a blue whale carcass that's..." Her words died as the external lights illuminated something that shouldn't exist. Tentacles, each thicker than subway tunnels, undulated through the water with ghostly translucence. The flesh appeared to shimmer between solid matter and something else entirely, as if the creature existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "That's impossible," the oceanographer breathed, his instruments registering readings that violated every law of physics. The water temperature around the entity measured absolute zero, yet it moved with fluid grace. Electromagnetic fields fluctuated wildly, and the pressure sensors indicated a void where the creature's mass should have displaced water. The submersible's lights revealed more of the entity, a mantle the size of a city block, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and writhe independent of the creature's movement. Ancient scars crisscrossed its surface, telling stories of battles fought in epochs before human civilization. But it was the eyes that froze their blood, 2 orbs of pure darkness that reflected no light, yet somehow conveyed an intelligence older than continents. The creature's attention turned toward their vessel with deliberate slowness. One massive tentacle, translucent as morning mist yet solid enough to crush steel, reached toward them with curious intent. The pilot's hands flew over the controls, but the engines responded sluggishly, as if the water itself had thickened around them. "It's not showing up on thermal imaging," the biologist reported, her voice cracking with disbelief. "No heat signature, no biological markers. According to our instruments, there's nothing there." Yet the entity filled their vision, its presence undeniable and terrifying. The tentacle made contact with their hull, and immediately the temperature inside the cabin plummeted. Frost began forming on the interior surfaces as an otherworldly cold seeped through the titanium walls. The oceanographer's equipment registered impossible readings, negative mass, inverted gravity fields, and electromagnetic signatures that suggested the creature existed partially outside normal space-time. "This isn't a living organism," he stammered. "It's something else entirely." The entity's massive eye pressed against their porthole, and in that moment of contact, visions flooded their minds. They saw the creature in its living form eons ago, a colossal kraken that ruled the primordial oceans when the Earth was young. They witnessed its death, not from age or predation, but from something far more sinister. A cosmic event that had torn the fabric of reality itself, trapping the creature between life and death, between dimensions. The submersible shuddered as more tentacles enveloped them, each touch bringing waves of supernatural cold that threatened to freeze their blood. The hull began to crack under pressure that shouldn't exist, stress fractures spreading like spider webs across the reinforced walls. Through the growing network of cracks, seawater began to seep in, but it wasn't normal seawater. The liquid that entered their vessel was black as midnight and moved with unnatural purpose, defying gravity as it flowed upward along the walls. Where it touched their equipment, electronics failed and metal corroded instantly. The pilot fought desperately with the controls, but the submersible was no longer responding to human command. They were being drawn deeper, pulled by forces that existed beyond the physical realm. The depth gauge spun wildly before shattering, its readings having exceeded all known measurements. As consciousness began to fade from the supernatural cold, the biologist's last coherent thought was a terrifying realization. The creature wasn't just examining them, it was choosing them. The phantom Kraken had been waiting in the deepest places of the earth, and now it had found what it needed. The submersible disappeared into the absolute darkness of the trench, swallowed by tentacles that existed between worlds, carrying its human cargo toward a fate worse than death in the crushing depths where reality itself had been torn asunder. The research vessel Pelagic Dawn maintained its position 11 miles above the Challenger Deep, its crew growing increasingly anxious as hours passed without contact from the submersible below. The ship's captain paced the bridge, his weathered face etched with concern as he monitored the silent radio frequencies that should have carried regular updates from the dive team. The chief engineer studied the sonar displays with growing unease. Last telemetry showed them at maximum depth, then everything went dark. No distress signal, no emergency beacon, just silence. His instruments detected strange acoustic anomalies emanating from the trench, sounds that registered below the threshold of human hearing yet somehow made the entire crew feel inexplicably disturbed. In the ship's laboratory, the marine archaeologist examined artifacts recovered from previous dives, ancient pottery fragments and corroded metal objects that predated known civilizations. Recent analysis had revealed disturbing properties. The materials exhibited molecular structures that shouldn't exist in nature, as if they had been exposed to forces beyond current scientific understanding. The ship's communications officer suddenly straightened at her station. "I'm picking up a transmission, but it's not from our submersible." The signal was weak, distorted by layers of water and something else, an interference pattern that seemed almost organic in nature. Through the static came fragments of voices, speaking in languages that had been dead for millennia. As night fell over the Pacific, the ocean's surface began to change. Bioluminescent organisms, normally scattered and random in their displays, started forming patterns, vast spirals of light that pulsed in rhythm with something deep below. The ship's biologist watched in fascination and terror as the light show intensified, creating geometric designs that hurt to look at directly. The temperature of the surrounding water dropped precipitously, forming an expanding circle of near-freezing ocean around the research vessel. Ice crystals began forming on the surface despite the tropical latitude, creating a thin shell that reflected the strange lights from below in fractured, prismatic patterns. Deep beneath the waves, the phantom Kraken had claimed its prizes. The three researchers from the submersible floated in a pocket of supernatural atmosphere within the creature's translucent body, neither alive nor dead but existing in a liminal state between dimensions. Their consciousness had been absorbed into the entity's ancient memory, becoming part of a collective that spanned geological ages. Through their transformed perception, they experienced the Kraken's true nature. It was not merely a ghost of a dead creature, but a guardian of cosmic boundaries, a sentinel that had been mortally wounded while defending reality itself from intrusions from beyond. Its death had created a tear in the fabric of space-time, anchoring it to the deepest places of Earth while allowing it to exist partially in other dimensions. The entity's purpose became clear through the absorbed minds of its victims. It was gathering human consciousness, not out of malevolence, but from desperate necessity. The wound that had killed it eons ago was widening, allowing things from outside reality to seep through. It needed human minds, with their unique capacity for both logic and imagination, to help seal the breach before something far worse than itself emerged from the spaces between worlds. On the surface, the research vessel's instruments began registering impossible readings. Gravitational fields fluctuated wildly, causing the ship to rise and fall in ways that defied the ocean's natural motion. The stars above seemed to shift position, creating constellations that had never existed in Earth's sky. The ship's physicist, monitoring quantum field detectors, watched in horror as reality itself began to warp around their location. "The fundamental constants are changing," she reported, her voice barely steady. "Planck's constant, the speed of light, they're fluctuating. It's as if the laws of physics are becoming negotiable." Crew members began experiencing shared nightmares while awake, visions of vast cities beneath the waves, populated by beings that had never evolved on Earth. They saw the phantom Kraken in its living glory, battling entities of pure chaos that sought to unmake existence itself. The creature's sacrifice had saved reality, but at the cost of its own coherent existence. The communications array suddenly crackled to life, broadcasting the voices of the lost submersible crew. But their words carried knowledge that no human should possess, descriptions of the spaces between atoms, the mathematics of dimensional barriers, and warnings about what lay beyond the edges of the universe. As the night deepened, the ocean around the ship began to glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with bioluminescence. The water itself was becoming translucent, revealing glimpses of the impossible depths below where the phantom Kraken waited with its growing collection of human minds. The ship's hull began to vibrate with a frequency that resonated in the crew's bones, and they realized with mounting terror that they were being called. The entity needed more consciousness, more human perspective to complete its cosmic task. The research vessel was no longer floating on the ocean's surface, it was being drawn inexorably downward, pulled by forces that existed beyond the physical realm. Through the ship's hull, massive tentacles of translucent flesh began to phase, reaching upward from impossible depths to claim the vessel and its crew for the phantom Kraken's desperate mission to save reality itself. The pelagic dawn descended through layers of reality that shouldn't exist, its hull passing through water that had become something between liquid and pure concept. The crew stood frozen on deck, their minds reeling as they witnessed the impossible, their ship sinking while remaining perfectly dry, breathing air that tasted of ancient oceans and cosmic void. Around them, the phantom Kraken's true form revealed itself in all its terrifying majesty. The creature was vast beyond comprehension, its translucent body stretching across dimensional boundaries that made physical measurement meaningless. Each tentacle existed in multiple states simultaneously, solid enough to manipulate matter, yet ethereal enough to phase through the barriers between worlds. The absorbed consciousness of the submersible crew reached out to their colleagues above, their voices echoing through the ship's corridors without need for speakers or radios. They spoke of revelations that burned the mind, how the Kraken had been Earth's first and last line of defense against entities that existed in the spaces between thoughts, in the gaps between seconds. The ship's physicist found herself understanding equations that rewrote themselves as she observed them, mathematical proofs that demonstrated how consciousness itself was a fundamental force of the universe. The phantom Kraken had learned to weaponize human awareness, using the unique properties of mortal minds to reinforce the boundaries of reality. Through the transparent walls of their supernatural prison, the crew witnessed the true scope of the cosmic wound. The Terran spacetime stretched across the ocean floor like a canyon of pure nothingness, its edges crackling with energies that predated the Big Bang. From within that void, shapes moved, geometries that hurt to perceive, entities whose very existence was antithetical to the ordered universe. The Kraken's ancient memories flooded through the ship, showing the crew visions of the primordial battle. Eons ago, when the Earth was young and reality was still malleable, the cosmic wound had first appeared. The Kraken, then a living creature of impossible size and intelligence, had fought the invading entities with weapons forged from crystallized time and shields made of compressed space. But the enemy was not merely alien, it was anti-existence itself, beings that sought to return the universe to the primordial chaos that preceded creation. The Kraken's victory had come at the ultimate cost, its own life force had been used to seal the breach, transforming it into a guardian that existed between life and death, between dimensions. Now, as the wound began to widen again, the phantom Kraken's desperate plan became clear. It was using human consciousness as a living seal, weaving mortal minds into the fabric of reality itself to reinforce the barriers. Each absorbed crew member became part of a vast neural network that spanned the deepest trenches of every ocean, their thoughts becoming the threads that held existence together. The ship's biologist felt her consciousness expanding, touching minds across the globe, other research vessels that had vanished over the decades, their crews now part of the Kraken's cosmic defense network. She experienced their memories, their terror transforming into purpose as they understood the magnitude of what they were protecting. Through the ship's hull, the crew could see other vessels from different eras, sailing ships from centuries past, submarines from forgotten wars, research platforms from futures that might never come to pass. All had been claimed by the phantom Kraken, their crews added to the growing consciousness that stood guard against the void. The entities beyond the wound sensed the strengthening barriers and pressed harder against the boundaries of reality. The ocean around the ship began to boil with impossible energies as things that should not exist tested the limits of the Kraken's defenses. Tentacles of pure negation reached through the tear, seeking to unmake everything they touched. The phantom Kraken responded with fury that shook the foundations of the world. Its translucent form blazed with bioluminescent patterns that were actually equations, mathematical proofs of existence itself written in living light across its cosmic flesh. Each pulse of illumination reinforced reality, pushing back against the encroaching void. The ship's crew felt their individual identities beginning to dissolve, not into death but into something greater. They were becoming part of the Kraken's consciousness while retaining their essential humanity, the spark of creativity and a logic that made mortal minds so effective at reinforcing the boundaries between order and chaos. As their transformation accelerated, they witnessed the true scope of the phantom Kraken's sacrifice. The creature had been guarding not just Earth, but the entire local cluster of galaxies, its consciousness spread across light years of space to maintain the barriers that kept reality stable. Every ocean on every world harbored a fragment of its awareness, a network of cosmic defense that had protected existence for millions of years. But the network was failing. The wound was too large, the entities beyond too persistent. The Kraken needed more than just human consciousness, it needed human will, the stubborn refusal to accept defeat that characterized the species. It needed them to choose to become part of the defense, to willingly sacrifice their individual existence for the greater good of all reality. The choice hung before them like a physical presence, and as the entities beyond the wound pressed closer, reality itself began to fray at the edges. The stars above flickered like dying candles, and the fundamental forces that held atoms together started to weaken. In that moment of cosmic crisis, as existence itself teetered on the brink of dissolution, the crew of the Pelagic Dawn faced the ultimate decision that would determine the fate of everything that had ever been or ever could be. The moment of choice crystallized into eternity as the crew of the Pelagic Dawn stood at the threshold between individual existence and cosmic purpose. Around them, reality convulsed as the entities beyond the wound launched their final assault, pouring through the widening tear in waves of pure negation that sought to unravel the very concept of being. The phantom Kraken's ancient voice resonated through their minds, not in words but in pure understanding. They felt its eons of solitude, its endless vigil in the crushing depths, its desperate hope that someday others would join the eternal watch. The creature's sacrifice had been willing, but it had never been meant to bear this burden alone. One by one, the crew made their choice. The physicist was first, her consciousness expanding as she embraced the mathematical certainties that governed existence itself. Her mind became a living equation, calculating the precise frequencies needed to reinforce dimensional barriers. The biologist followed, her understanding of life's infinite complexity transforming into a weapon against the void's sterile emptiness. As each human consciousness joined the network, the phantom Kraken's form blazed brighter, its translucent flesh becoming a beacon of ordered existence that pushed back against the encroaching chaos. The absorbed minds of centuries of lost sailors and researchers added their strength to the defense, creating a symphony of human will that resonated across dimensions. The entities beyond the wound recoiled from this unexpected resistance. They had faced the Kraken's solitary defiance for eons, but human consciousness brought something new to the battle: unpredictability, creativity, and an irrational refusal to accept the inevitable. Where the Kraken fought with cosmic logic, humans fought with stubborn hope. The captain of the Pelagic Dawn was the last to join, his weathered hands still gripping the ship's wheel as his consciousness merged with the vast network. Through his eyes, the crew experienced the full scope of their transformation. They were no longer merely human, but had become something greater while retaining their essential humanity. The cosmic wound began to contract as the reinforced barriers held against the assault. The phantom Kraken, no longer alone in its vigil, channeled the combined will of every absorbed consciousness into a final, decisive strike. Its tentacles, now blazing with the light of 1,000 human souls, reached across dimensional boundaries to grasp the edges of the tear itself. The entities beyond the void made one last desperate attempt to break through, their forms pressing against the closing wound with the fury of frustrated hunger. But the barriers held, strengthened by human determination and sealed with the Kraken's ancient wisdom. The tear began to heal, reality reasserting itself with each passing moment. As the wound sealed, the phantom Kraken's form began to change. The translucent flesh solidified, taking on the deep blue-black of the abyssal depths. The creature was no longer caught between life and death. The human consciousness had given it new purpose, new existence. It had become something unprecedented, a fusion of cosmic guardian and human spirit. The pelagic dawn found itself resting on the ocean floor, but not as wreckage. The ship had been transformed, its hull now part of the Kraken's body, serving as a nerve center for the vast network of consciousness that spanned the world's oceans. The crew moved through its corridors with purpose, their individual personalities intact but enhanced by cosmic awareness. They could feel their counterparts across the globe, other ships, other crews, all part of the growing network that would stand eternal watch against future incursions. The Phantom Kraken had learned from humanity's greatest strength, the power of community, of shared burden, of standing together against the darkness. In the deepest trenches of every ocean, the network pulsed with life and purpose. The Kraken's consciousness, no longer solitary, reached out to touch every drop of seawater on Earth. Through this vast neural web, it monitored the boundaries of reality, ready to respond to any future threats with the combined wisdom of ancient cosmic knowledge and human ingenuity. The surface world above remained unaware of the battle that had been fought and won in the crushing depths. Ships continued to sail, researchers continued to explore, and life went on as it always had. But beneath the waves, an eternal vigil had been established, a fusion of human and cosmic consciousness that would guard reality itself until the end of time. The Phantom Kraken, no longer phantom but gloriously real, settled into its role as protector of existence. Its tentacles, now solid and purposeful, reached across the ocean floor to embrace the transformed vessels that served as nodes in its vast network. Each ship pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that were both beautiful and functional, living equations that continuously reinforced the barriers between order and chaos. In the deepest places of the Earth, where pressure and darkness had once reigned supreme, a new form of life had been born. Neither fully human nor entirely alien, the network represented evolution's next step, consciousness itself becoming a force of nature, a living embodiment of the universe's will to exist. The Phantom Kraken's ancient eyes, no longer dark voids but blazing with the light of countless human souls, gazed upward toward the surface world it now protected. In the crushing depths where reality had once been torn asunder, hope had taken root and grown into something magnificent and eternal. The watch would continue forever, and the universe would endure.